Lexington. For people who don't know me, I've been in Lexington 34 years. I'm a practicing anesthesiologist, do a little bit of human rights now and then, and a lot of interfaith work. All right. Good afternoon on this lovely sunny day. Thank you for coming. On behalf of Lex4Palestine, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you for our first Palestine American dialogue. It is truly heartwarming to see such a diverse audience gathered today. We're coming together for an important conversation because we all know what's going on. Today we have gathered here in the spirit of open dialogue and understanding to shed light on the complexities surrounding the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and justice. This event serves as a platform for us to engage in meaningful discourse, to listen to diverse perspectives, and to cultivate empathy and solidarity. As we embark on this journey to exploration and reflection, let us remember the significance of empathy and respect. So a few rules. We encourage open dialogue and we exchange of good ideas. However, please ensure that your comments and questions are expressed in a respectful manner. While we may hold different opinions and experiences, we all approach everybody differently, and we want to have openness, understanding, and sensitivity. Let us practice active listening, allowing each speaker the opportunity to express his thoughts and experiences without interruption. And there's vast experiences right here. There will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions, so hold on to your questions. All right. What is shared here in this space is sacred. So we want confidentiality and respect. While we encourage you to share anything you learn here, we honor that you trust the participants, and it is okay to take photos, right?
Just not of the people that are sitting here.
Right.
Just only the panel.
Okay, only the panel. Okay. By adhering to these ground rules, we can create a supportive and inclusive environment where meaningful dialogue can flourish. Now I would like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Please share your name, your background, your profession, and anything that connects you to Palestine. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan Gross. I'm from Louisville, and I am an anti-Zionist Jew, and my father was a Holocaust survivor and educator here in Kentucky. He spoke to small school districts and then went on to write a book, get some legislature passed in 2018, the Holocaust and Genocide Education Act, which he was a namesake of. And I work in TV and film production, but I've been a harsh critic of Israel for a long time as a Jewish person, and this is a passion, not a passion because it's so awful what's happening, but something I'm heavily invested in, so this unfortunately gave me an opportunity to use my voice, and so that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Musa Saman. I'm Christian Palestinian. I say Christian because there is a lot of us here in the state that don't know Christian exists in Palestine. That's why I'm saying I'm Christian. So I lived in Palestine for 26 years. I lived through the first Intifada and the miserable life we lived over there. So I'm ready to share my experience, not by Googling or reading books, what I experienced back in Palestine.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nachie Braga. I'm a first-generation Brazilian immigrant, a lifelong revolutionary communist, and I awoke to political consciousness in my own life during the second Intifada, so it was very much an instructive event in my upbringing. I have a company here in town called Geomancer Permaculture. We do a lot of agroforestry, ecological restoration based in indigenous land management practices for food production. So what is happening in Palestine, the mechanized extermination of an indigenous people is very tied into the internationalist scope of that work in permaculture.
Excuse me. Hi everyone, my name is Raheem Shalish. I'm from Louisville, I'm a student. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather is from Shukwa, Palestine, and him and his brothers immigrated through Latin America, and that's where my father was born. And then I was born here in the United States, so I'm proudly a Palestinian American, and I'm thankful to be here today.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Mona Amri. I am a Libyan American. I am a advocate for Palestine and Palestinian rights, and I'm a research coordinator at UK.
Hello everyone, my name is Hannah Issa. I am a dental student at the University of Kentucky. I am Palestinian American. I lived in Palestine for 4 years, and I go back and visit every summer, and I actually have a media family living there now, so obviously it's something that I feel is important to speak up on.
All right. Could you provide some historical background regarding the events unfolding in Gaza? Share some insights into the historical and cultural significance of Gaza and how this informs the Palestinian struggle for self-determination. So whoever wants to start first.
Okay, so as we know, I don't want to go too deep into this. Gaza has been under a blockade now for 20 years. That means it has been completely surrounded by walls. Nobody's allowed in, nobody's allowed out. No goods come in, no goods come out without Israel okaying it. They no longer have an airport after Israel bombed it. There is no pier. There's a reason that Biden was trying to, build a pier. You're wondering why are there all these universities and not a single pier, even though they're, all of West Gaza is the Mediterranean. They are not allowed to even build a pier without Israel okaying it, and they have not okayed it. So complete military blockade. The size of Gaza is about 25 miles long by 5 miles wide. That is about half the size of Lexington, if we put that in perspective. It is more densely populated than the city of Tokyo. And half the population is children. So when we are talking about genocide, when we refer to collective punishment, we have to realize that this has been going on for much longer than October 7th, that this has been going on for almost 100 years now, but the physical blockade itself is about 20 years. And if anybody wants to add anything more to it.
I would say also that Gaza is a place where many who escaped the Nakba went in 48, and it was controlled by Egypt after the Arab-Israeli war, and that's sort of when it was made into the Gaza Strip as we know it now. And so it holds a lot of weight in terms of, right of return of those people who live in Gaza and family members whose families were expelled during 48. So,
All right. How do the historical narratives of America relate to the current situation in Palestine? Explain how the experiences of Palestinians in Gaza intersect with broader issues of social justice and human rights, both within the region and globally.
Okay. So when we look at, Johnny brought up the idea of the forced migration of Palestinians, the Nakba in 1948, where the Israelis first pushed Palestinian out of Haifa, which is now in Israel, out of all those cities that were once Palestine. They were all pushed into Gaza. And at one point, Israel was completely okay with using that land as just kind of pushing all the Palestinians out. We saw the same thing happen with Native Americans. When we called it the Trail of Tears, right? We pushed all those Americans that were native, maybe to Kentucky, or native to Illinois, or native to, different states, but we pushed them all out to little reservations all over, right? And with that, we saw the erasure of culture, the erasure of language, the erasure to the land. So you can't just sever people from their roots and then expect them to survive elsewhere. And then we're seeing another push now. Where are they trying to push them? Into Sinai, right? Literally into the desert. They're not, I feel like with Israel, it's like any other settler colonial project. This isn't new, right? That to establish settlements, to establish the colonization, you have to get rid of the native population at hand. In the US, it was Native Americans. Here, it is the Palestinians. We're gonna push them out and we're gonna replace them with our people, right? And so that's what we're saying.
I think certainly when you think about relating this to American history and different narratives, the Trail of Tears is the most obvious. It's a very clear connection of a native population that was pushed out, and I appreciate that you emphasize that they're culturally insignificant here now, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it's the unfortunate truth that Native American culture, which is quite literally native to this land, is no longer relevant in today's society. Reservations are quite frankly frowned upon by most Americans, and it's an understanding, I'm sure amongst the people in this room, but most of the population, that it's wrong not only the Trail of Tears, but to then be put on these reservations that they were somehow given this land, when in reality they're being barricaded to such a small portion of what is truly their land. And so the idea that there's some sort of solution in which Palestinians can be given a small plot of their homeland, as if that wasn't already bad enough, but if they're not given positions that can lead to political change, cultural relevance, if they're continuously oppressed in manners beyond just having a land to live on, it's very clear that we know more than anyone that this isn't a future for Palestine and Palestinian people. So I think it's important to realize that as if forced migration wasn't enough, the cultural oppression is just as painful. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just to connect it to more recent events, we have to be aware that the entire Zionist project has always been expressly a colonial kind of extension of what was at the time the British Empire. The attempt to gain a beachhead in the region for imperialism, for access to fossil fuels and other resources. And in the post-World War II era, the United States has stepped into that kind of role that was formerly occupied by the British, as seeing itself as the sole global superpower. That is why the Zionist project has received so much support from the contemporary American government. And actually what we are seeing now is the breakdown of the post-World War II global order, with kind of the abject hypocrisy of what is going on in Palestine sort of acting as the spark for that. And it's very important for Americans to understand that context and to realize what's going on in the majority of the world with regard to how America is seen and the role that it has played. Because if we do not understand that, we're going to be very confused and angry and disoriented with everything that is happening because of this.
Yeah, I mean, I ditto everything you just said, and manifest destiny, that was the belief that this is ours, it's not the Indians, it belongs to us, and that's what we're seeing now in Israel, and even more extreme with the settlers in the West Bank, who, they also have a divine destiny to them, that this land, both sides of the river, is theirs, and all Palestinians must be expelled. And I tell my first I want to say, I had a Jewish person who told me I'm the worst kind of Jew. He said to me, this was on October 11th, he said, if you feel that way, why don't you give this land back to the Native Americans? And I said to him, well, the fact that you acknowledge that what's going on in Israel is so similar lets me know that you're okay with that. You're okay with that, and I'm not okay with that. I mourn the Native peoples gone from this country, and they're still here, but when I drive through this country, Everywhere I look, I think there were people here, you know, before there was a Kohl's and a Lowe's and Walmart. So,
Yes. All right. What role has America played in the current genocide in Gaza? Please discuss the taxes, military aid, and weapons.
I think Netanyahu recently said what we need from America is munitions, munitions, munitions. And they cannot continue if America is not constantly providing munitions, munitions, munitions. And on top of, we all know that Israel is our number one, that we give them the highest amount of military aid and, you know, tax breaks, weapons, all of that without any red tape, which is insane to say, right? Especially now when they're being accused of possibly carrying out a genocide. Not only does that go against our own American laws, but it goes against international laws as well. So I don't think Israel would be able to continue much longer without U.S. help in not just money, but what would that term called? Support, media support, global support, all of that.
Let's say not just the military aspects of the economy, but the entire foundation of the Zionist economy is based on the hyper-exploitation, of course, of the Palestinian population, and also the tech industry. Companies like Google that make it very attractive for Jews in Europe to migrate, spend time there with the compulsory military service, and also to make a lot of money in these careers and then take that money back. Without those linkages there is no real economy there that can succeed on its own basis. So.
and Palestine, especially Gaza, has been basically a testing ground for the weapons industry, where, you know, they're experimenting with new stuff every day, and it's going to go on the market, and look how effective it was. So it's a laboratory for weapons.
I'm gonna add something quick. Actually, every American, every citizen here is helping what's happening overseas by electing these people, getting paid from the APAC, millions of dollars. They're the one writing and changing everything in the Constitution and the way they want to do it, because they're getting paid from Israel. So when we vote for these people, and it's happening here in Kentucky, a lot of people run for office. They might know the president, he's a Democrat or Republican, and they vote straight for everybody who's running for that. So by doing that, we're giving money. We're supporting these people, the one they making hard decisions. And that's absolutely wrong. We need to move on and start thinking before we vote, not because he's a Democrat or Republican. We need to look and study this person before he runs for office.
And just to add to that, like Melissa was saying, like our tax money and our elected representatives that we put in office are directly contributing to what's going on and giving power to the genocide that's taking place. So that's why it's not only our right, but our duty to speak up and to speak out against what's happening, and to continuously call our representatives and continuously speak out against it, because our actions are contributing to it.
Right. We don't want this genocide in our name.
Exactly.
And right now it is.
Mhm.
And I think the American government has a lot of blood on its hands.
Yep.
All right, what are some common misconceptions about Palestine? And how can we address these misconceptions about Palestine? Anybody want to start? Musa?
No, I'll go with the second one.
Okay.
I think a big issue, and it was mentioned on our document, and just in preparation, a big issue, and I mean, it's personally, I don't know, almost, I would say challenging, is the idea that Palestinian resistance is anti-Semitic, or that this is anti-Semitism being manifested. If you're opposed to the Zionist movement. Never before, and a few of us have already alluded to it, but never before has a nation acted with such impunity, and then when they're criticized or acted against in any way, it's somehow anti-Semitic or in any way prejudice, not just anti-Semitic, is just recently, after the attack on a truck of aid workers, I saw a media member who was from Israel who said that the criticism of this accident is anti-Semitic, and they had never seen something so atrocious in media, and it was just so challenging. As someone who had spoken out about that and how wrong that was, unfortunately the lives lost weren't even Palestinian in that situation, the aid workers, not that that changes anything, but that to sit there and think, I posted on my social media, I spoke to my friends or the people around me about that, and to now be accused that I'm being prejudiced to something, and not to something, to Jewish people, it's such a dangerous precedent, and I've said that since the beginning, is that if they can act with violence, if they can enact a genocide on Palestinian people and God forbid, other people in the region and globally, and anything to criticize them, not even military action against them or physical action, but media criticism, political acts, them being charged in international courts, to say that it's anti-Semitic and it's a faith-based accusation is just so dangerous. No government, no person here in the United States or globally can act in violation of law. If I commit a crime, I'm held accountable based on the crime that I committed, not based on the profile of the person I am. And because Israel is such a faith-based nation with Judaism, is the idea that any action that they take is protected by being Jewish in base, and any criticism of it is anti-Semitic, is just extremely harmful. Whether you agree or disagree with the Zionist movement, I think that's a really dangerous precedent to set for global affairs of any nation, and certainly in this case.
Yeah, definitely the use of anti-Semitism to deflect any criticism of Israel is definitely being abused heavily. And I think there is real anti-Semitism in the Arab world, but it has to be seen in the context of the Zionist project, and then things that came after that, like the European anti-Semitism that then kind of bled over into that world to sort of stoke the flames even more, when in reality Muslim and Jewish relations for several hundred years, if not 1,500 so years, was very peaceful for the most part, is marked by coexistence. They call the Muslim Spanish era the golden age of Judaism, because there was such a center of Jewish learning in Spain, and then in the Middle East, in Palestine, there's always been a Jewish presence, despite it being small after the destruction of the Second Temple. And now Zionism has made it so that even those communities that were in Palestine, they have become part of this animosity, and therefore there is this Jewish, Muslim, mainly Muslim, obviously there's Christians in Palestine, but like split, where there's just a block, basically.
Yes.
And something else I want to add, sorry.
Yeah.
Misconception oftentimes is that it's like this religious war going on in Palestine, and that's what they both kind of alluded to. But oftentimes, oppressed people, marginalized people are treated like a monolith, and it's a way of dehumanizing them. We saw it happen with the Native Americans as well, with indigenous people. We treated them like a monolith, and it's just, the less we know about them, the less we care. And so that's what we see with Palestinians a lot, is they're just like this group. Oftentimes they're portrayed as a Muslim group, and it's easy to say, oh, they're violent or whatever, whatnot. But it's important that we understand that Palestinians are made of all, there's many religious backgrounds. There's Christian Palestinians, there's Jewish Palestinians, believe it or not, and then obviously there's Muslim Palestinians. And of course, there is Jerusalem in Palestine, and there's no denying that that's a big thing, a big reason why there's fighting going on. But it's not the main reason for it, and it's not the only reason that Palestinians are being treated, are being oppressed and committed genocide against. And so it's important that we don't portray this as a religious war, as Jewish versus Muslims, because again, it just erases a lot of the complexity of what's going on. And it's important that we inform ourselves of all backgrounds in Palestine and that we speak on every part of it and not just the religious aspects of it.
Correct. The misconception when you talk with the average American, they think it's a war between the Muslims and the Jews.
They think it's an age-old war.
Yes.
They think it's
And
just
it's Muslims
going
and
on
Jews.
forever.
And I always have to say, it's the Palestinians and the Israelis,
Right.
okay? And Jews and Christians and Muslims are people of the book. You know, you have to love Christians and Jews and Muslims because this is a teaching of Islam. The other thing is, you know, children when they're growing up in this country, when they look at the map of the world, there is no Palestine. So children are getting confused, you know, that's when they go and they want to say where their ancestors came from, Germany, England, Ireland. Well then, where's Palestine? You know, they have just washed it off all the maps, and so it's very confusing for the average American. Thank you. How has media coverage influenced the public perception of the genocide in Gaza?
So if we look back shortly after October 7th, there was this whole narrative put out about what Hamas, what the media claimed and what the Israeli government claimed that Hamas did on October 7th. And there was a strong push that there were 40 beheaded babies. I'm sure everybody here has heard of that. And you know, the Israeli government is very calculated, and they know exactly what they were doing. It's not like this was an accident. They knew, and they came out later, and many people, this has proven to be a myth, and it's proven to be completely made up. But the Israeli government knew exactly what they were doing, and even these media outlets, when that was pushed out, there was a strong, people had already built like this conception, because like they felt some type of way towards the resistant efforts in Palestine. And so whenever, even though it came out to be untrue, and some media outlets did put that out there, actually most of them did come out and say it was untrue, but it wasn't the same push that was publicized to begin with. See, the difficulty in that, or what's complicated about that, is you already have these emotions and these feelings towards the resistant efforts of Palestine. And so not only do you have to unlearn the facts of what happened, but you have to unlearn the emotions that happen. And this is something that we see happen a lot with the Israeli government and the misinformation that they put out. And so that's a big push and a big power that they have on their side, is that the media outlets are putting out this misinformation. We build these emotions, we build these feelings towards the Palestinian resistance efforts, and then they come out and say it's untrue, but all that has already been built and we have to unlearn it all.
And Joe Biden was on stage saying he saw the photos of the 40 beheaded babies.
And the White House had to come out and say.
I mean, it's criminal, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the media's job has been to manufacture this consent for this genocide, and they have done it in other wars as well. That is why everybody was gung-ho for the Iraq War when it was first starting, at least in the US, right? And then slowly, when that curtain starts lifting and all this pushback happens, you realize what we knew wasn't what we actually knew, that we had this information beforehand. Why wasn't it available to us then, right? Then we wouldn't have been okay with this, you know, the Iraq invasion or the Vietnam War or so forth, right? So this is what the media is still continuing to do, but there's a greater pushback, I feel like, and a quicker pushback, in the sense that they're trying to manufacture this war by either leaving things out that should, you know, you should know, or in the language they use, right? They're very, very good at using passive language when talking about Palestinian lives. They will say things like, a strike has killed, or a person has died, right? Where did the strike come from? Is it a thunder strike, you know? Well, they will say things like, Palestinian minor, and it's a child that's 5 years old, you know, instead of using children. And then they don't have the same language when talking about the kids of Ukraine getting killed, or, you know, so they're always kind of manufacturing this consent for us to be okay with what's happening.
Another example I was going to put out there that the Israeli regime used the media for, that this is a way that they use the media to kind of excuse themselves, and they kind of like push the attention away until everything dies down, and then they get away with it. And a perfect example was whenever Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian journalist, a Palestinian American journalist, she's an American citizen, was killed. She was murdered with her press vest on. This was a year ago or so, or probably a little bit longer. But anyways, she was murdered by the Israeli government. And what the and obviously there was a lot of voices that came up against it. They spoke out against it. And what the Israeli government said was she was caught in the crossfire and Palestinians killed her. And so that's what the media ran with. That's what was put everywhere. Then, after there were investigations done by the Israeli government themselves, they found that they were actually the ones who killed her, their own soldiers, and it wasn't an accidental murder. It was she was at the end of the scope of a sniper, but because the media had already pushed out this narrative, they got themselves out of that spotlight, and then there were no real consequences for the murdering of innocent Palestinian journalists. And so that's something that the government tends to do quite often, the Israeli government, is they put out a fake narrative just until they're out of the spotlight, and then they get away with it. And that's something that the media has helped them do, and the media is guilty of since the beginning of everything that's happening with Palestinians, and something we see here in America as well. Any marginalized group or oppressed group, they put out this fake narrative until the spotlight is gone, until the fire dies down, and then the truth comes out, but there are no real consequences after that.
I just want to add something quick. I mean, I'm going to talk about the Israeli. They stole everything, our culture, their food, our food, music, and everything else. And the thing what happened on October 7, where they said children beheaded, woman was raped, killing women. Actually, if you go back in history, nobody knows, maybe, or 1915, Turkey had killed Armenian, 1.5 million Armenian, and that's what they did. They killed kids, they beheaded kids, they killed women. So even their story about what happened in October 7, it was taken about 100 years ago. So not even, like they cannot even come up with their own story. They're always lying and get their information from somewhere else.
Well, yeah, using the accusation of systemic rape is a constant of colonialism as well. That's most news stories in America about Native Americans are the same thing. Oh, rape, killed women, children, to gain more support for further genocide.
I mean, I'm sorry, quick thing. Speaking of no pictures, no videos about what happened, even the Holocaust happened, 60 years ago, 70 years ago? There was pictures of people were dying on the street. And every genocide, every war, even Vietnam War, there is videos, there is pictures. And you want to tell me something happened 2023, there is not one picture of a kid with no head, beheaded, or even a woman slaughtered or raped? That's a big lie.
Can I just add one more thing, which I think it's really important that we understand the present historical moment and the context, that it's more clear than ever before that yes, the Western media, the mainstream media is the propaganda arm of the state, of the militarists and so forth. But like never before now, because the Zionist state has been so coddled, so protected, so sure in its own delusions for so long and has not been questioned by the propaganda that it puts out, they are saying things that are absolutely absurd and immediately can be proven wrong or researched. And so we see like never before that the media has lost all credibility in what really the role that they are playing in this. And I think the discussion around that has turned in a really significant way that we need to be present with.
Yes, correct. The damage is done. The media does the damage, and when the truth comes out, it's too late. I was in Kuwait in the maternity hospital when they said, pregnant women in Kuwait were bayoneted by the Iraqi army, and children were taken out of incubators and thrown on the street. Even the president said it. It was not true because I was in that hospital and no Iraqi soldier was allowed to enter the hospital because it was a maternity hospital. And I was there. And even when I said that on television with Sue Wiley, okay, they disregarded what I said because the media. Can you share narratives from Gaza that have left an impact on you?
I'm going to say not just Gaza, what happened in Gaza. I lived it there for 26 years before I moved here. That's something they do it every day, killing people, torturing people, taking your home. I lived in Palestine for 26 years. I visit every place in Palestine except Gaza Strip. I wasn't allowed to. Even that was before 30 years ago. They won't allow me to go. Seeing the kids without parents, seeing fathers, mothers losing their kids, their family. I can't imagine living. What's going to happen to the new generation without father, without mother, without brothers, without sister, without family? What are you expecting? That's why Israel trying to kill every person there because they were scared. The new generation is going to take over. It's going to be a lot worse for them.
I think there are so many narratives that are difficult. You mentioned it in the very opening, and you as well, of that a population of over 2 million people and nearly 50% are children. So when you see these deaths, I believe just recently in the past few days, children alone have reached over 13,000. And over the last few weeks to a month, obviously due to deprivation of resources, children have started dying of starvation. I think that number's hit 27 was the last that I saw. It's really hard to fathom that. 27 children starving, 13,000 children dying. I'm not sure the total death number. It's so difficult to fathom. And like I said, there's so many sub-narratives that are just so painful when you hear about aid workers being killed or people being targeted as they seek aid, people worshiping. There are just so many people in a hospital. One that I wanted to highlight, just in my position as a college student, and I know some of us are still getting an education, is that by early December I had spoke at my university in Louisville. I go to Bellarmine. And I spoke to a crowd of mostly students, and it was to reach out similar to this event. And I emphasized, and I had looked it up, is that every university or college in Palestine already in December had already been damaged in some way and lost students due to this, due to the attacks of Israel. And now we're at a point just recently where the school year has been ended, not because of a lack of buildings and the damage to the universities themselves, but from a lack of students, that they've hit such a high in death totals that they're not continuing with the rest of this educational year. And of course, centers of education are going to be main targets. And like I said, you can highlight so many narratives about women, about mothers, about children lost, but I tried to emphasize that to people of think of the young people in your life. We think of people in high school or early education, and certainly in college, that they're this bright future that they present to the world. And all of us have family members who are in dental school who we're so proud of, and we see them as this beacon of hope. And in Palestine, they're taken from them, not just their places of education, but their lives and their ability to lead a future and a next generation for Palestine. I think it's just so haunting.
I think about for how long the kids of Gaza have been trying to get our attention. That and I remember seeing it in the news before, that they broke world records to try to get our attention for most kites flown in the air. They had to take it from China. They said they were scared to go against China, but they wanted to do it. And it was all to bring attention to what they're going through. This was in 2011. They were still locked behind that little wall. They also broke the world record for biggest parachute game. Again, trying to get our attention to say, like, we're suffering here, we're dying here. Every other year, the UN would come up with reports saying they're not going to be able to survive much longer, completely cut off, that the soil is degrading, that they don't have enough food, that they don't have enough water. And none of us have shaken the tree of that. You know, we've kind of ignored them, and I fear that we're continuing to ignore them, and we'll ignore them again. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, you're right. The bombing of the hospitals, the bombing of the universities, the water grid, sanitation, electricity, that's all gone. Greenhouses, okay? So not only are civilians dying in the buildings and they're dying from the bombing, but now with the lack of clean water and food and electricity, you're gonna have disease, you're gonna have diarrhea, you're gonna have cholera. And so now it's gonna be a slow death, okay? And there'll be a lot more than the ones who died during the bombing. I mean, just think of that. What are your hopes for the future of Palestine, and how do you envision achieving it?
I think that the tragedy of October 7th is that resistance had to happen, period. Like that it was necessary, that Zionism created this situation where resistance was the only option. And I just want to say there were, you know, despite how we want to look at what the word innocence means, I mean, there were children killed in October 7th in the Al-Aqsa flood. There were. I mean, that is a fact. There were 40 babies. There was one baby, she was killed, and her name was Mila Cohen. And there is video of disturbing things that happened on October 7th. And I want to say something that I heard Norm Finkelstein say, which I really appreciated, was that he was talking about William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist, and his reaction to the Nat Turner slave revolt, when Nat Turner led a slave rebellion where they decided they were going to kill everybody. They were going to kill women, children, everyone on the plantation, white, was going to be killed. And that's what happened. And these were people who lived their life in bondage, slavery, and he was executed, and most of the rebellion participants were executed. But when William Lloyd Garrison was basically, do you condemn this? Do you condemn the Nat Turner slave rebellion? He said, well, first of all, I told you so, and I've been telling you for years. And this is what we've been saying for years, is that this was inevitable. Something like this was inevitable. And he also said, the excesses of the slaves cannot be justified, but I can't condemn them. And can you imagine living in basically a fortified open-air prison for your whole life? If you were born in 2005 in Gaza, you never even met an Israeli probably, because it's been closed off. You live under a siege every 2 years, your family members are being killed with new high-tech weaponry. And that is why October 7th happened. And so it is a tragedy, and that's why Zionism has to be abolished. I don't think that there's ever going to be an Israel where all the Jews are going to leave. That's just not going to happen. But something is going to happen, and I think Israeli society is fraying right now. What we're seeing is Israel itself kind of falling apart from the inside with the reaction of October 7th, the reaction of the army and the genocide going on, and more extremist elements with the settlers. I think there could, maybe you could possibly see an internal kind of civil war happen in Israel, which may be inevitable, but hopefully we can come out on the other side of this with a free Palestine and coexistence, and right of return, land back, reparations for Palestinian refugees from the Nakba, full integration, no more rabbinate of Israel. I don't know if it could be called Palestine, Israel, Israel, Palestine, but it has to be, to me, a one-state solution. So, yeah.
Can I add something quick? I mean, I think the war in Palestine, it's between the Israeli and the Palestinian. So what happened on October 7th, I'm not saying it's justified. Every single person, when it turns 18 in Israel, you have to serve in the army. Is that true? It's 100% true. So when the Palestinians went to attack. It's a war zone. So they attacking soldiers and whoever, I'm not justifying anybody get killed or anybody get hurt. So when they attack, the Palestinians, when they attack Israel, they attack mostly soldier, 100% soldier, and there's casualty. It's the same thing, what everybody is saying. Do you condemn October 7th? No, it's the same thing. It's a war zone. I'm not with killing, but I'm just saying it play both sides. If you're trying to kill everybody in Gaza to destroy Hamas or to destroy the Palestinian, it's the same thing. They were trying to destroy every Israeli soldier, and most of them were soldiers in October 7th.
I'd like to say that I don't believe that there's any solution to any of this on either a diplomatic or a military basis. That the only way forward is for an internationalist mass movement of the oppressed, of the working class, to understand, to follow through on and achieve the promise of the Arab Spring in 2011, of the First Intifada, of the civilian-led March of Return in 2018, and to understand the turn of Palestinian resistance fighters to individual terrorism, which is a blind alley with no way out, is the direct result of the betrayal, historically, of many Arab nationalist governments, bourgeois leaders who put the interests of the narrow interests of their little countries and diplomatic relations with this or that imperialist power above the well-being of the masses, of their constituents. And so that is where the discussion should be, I think, and that is not just a Israel-Palestine issue. That is exactly the only thing that could solve issues here in the United States and globally.
All right. In what ways can allies effectively support the Palestinian cause without overshadowing any of the Palestinian voices?
So I think the first thing, and something I genuinely believe, is that silence is not an option at all for anyone. Like mentioned earlier, our tax dollars, our elected representatives are directly, are the power behind the genocide that's taking place. And so it's our duty, like we as fellow human beings who care about humanity as a whole have a duty to speak up. And so don't worry about overshadowing Palestinian voices just yet. If you're not speaking up, go ahead and speak up, because that's what we need. We have there's power in us as a people. There's power in numbers, and so once we all start speaking up, that's really where the change comes from, and I believe that. Here in Lexington, we have obviously Lex4Palestine, that we have an Instagram that you can follow us on, that we post all our events in ways that you can take action directly. We also have a phone banking effort where you just have to make one phone call a day to an elected representative and just say, hey, I don't support the genocide taking place, and I don't want my country to support them either. And if we think about it, if a majority of us are doing that, they're gonna have to respond to us. They're gonna have to, and we're actually starting to see a change, and we're starting to see this movement where, because of all the voices that are speaking up, because of all the actions that are being taken, the elected representatives are starting to fall a little to the pressure. Now, is it exactly where we want them to be? Obviously not, but they are starting to succumb to the pressure, and so we have to continue to push those efforts. The biggest thing, like with overshadowing Palestinian voices, I would just say, make sure that whenever you are speaking up on the matter, that you're doing it from an informed position. Attending talks like this is a perfect way to learn more about it. Watching documentaries, learning that like this didn't just start on October 7th. Obviously, we've given you all many examples of how it didn't. To know that this wasn't, what happened on October 7th was, there were peaceful efforts before that didn't succeed, and it's because peaceful efforts weren't being heard over there. And so it's important that we inform ourselves. Go watch there's a short documentary on YouTube, I can't even remember the name of it, but just look up the Great March of Return for the people of Gaza. There's a documentary that shows you that there were peaceful efforts before October 7th. There were many peaceful efforts that just did not succeed because the people in power didn't want to hear it that way. And so just to inform yourselves, to learn about these things, and then having informed conversations, and to know that to keep the Palestinians' best interests in mind as you're having these conversations, that's the biggest thing I could say. Gaza Fights for Freedom. So that's the name of, and it's for free on YouTube. And it's not very long, and it's extremely informative, and I believe everyone here.
Gaza Fights for Freedom.
Gaza Fights. I can write it down for you.
Gaza
Yeah,
Fights for Freedom.
You should also watch the Lobby, the movie The Lobby about the Israel lobby in America, and it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, Israelism.
Yeah. And of course, you know, we have to have the information out there, okay? Because the average American doesn't know what's going on. The media is not doing a good job. So we need to be invited to churches, synagogues, mosques, women's groups, schools, the police, because that's how we have to spread the information, because the average person doesn't know. And you know what? The propaganda is against us. The propaganda is against the Palestinians. It's against the Muslims. It's against what's going on in the Middle East. And it's so one-sided pro-Israel. And the average American, unfortunately, doesn't know. So please, reach out to us, invite us. This is free information. The word has to get out. It's our duty. It's our duty as citizens, as human beings, as people of faith, to speak the truth, no matter how it's going to hurt somebody. And they don't know, so we have to educate. Are there any questions for the panelists? Yes.
The role of Hamas in this whole mess. The Palestinians don't necessarily support Hamas. Is that correct?
Well, the war actually, it's not between Hamas and Israel. Like I said, there is a Christian, and I'm not going to say there is a Christian in the group of Hamas. Hamas is an Islamic group, but there is other group, Palestinian, Fatah, Jabhat Shabi. I mean, I could name, there is a lot of groups. So they're fighting against Israel. So it's not just Hamas, but the media here will show you it's Hamas. It's like when the United States goes to a war, they won't say the Air Force, they will say United States Army, Reserve, Marines, Navy, and everybody. And it's the same thing. It's the war there. It's with every Palestinian who lives in Gaza. But they pick the name Hamas, and they call them terrorists. So everybody else is going to think it's Hamas. No, it's every Palestinian is fighting for their freedom, for their land, for their safety. So it's not just Hamas.
The United States government has had a history over the last, since I've been born anyway, in the early 50s, is that they concoct historical data, and the media buys into this. They did that in Vietnam. They did that in the first Iraq war. And unfortunately, the people of the United States don't seem to be, I don't know how to do this any other way but not being kind. They just don't seem to give a damn to go ahead and get enough information then to tell their representatives. Because some of our representatives are worthless. Let me just say that, because they, first of all, even if they tried to learn it, they probably couldn't.
Well, I want to say Al-Qassam is the fighting force of Hamas. The Al-Qassam brigades. That's who's fighting in Gaza. Hamas is not just the military wing of Gaza. It's they do social services. They run a government. They have been since 2006. So I think to look at every fighter in the Al-Qassam brigades and the other movements fighting with the Qassam is, you have to see them as individuals who are Gazans, who have lived under this occupation, under this siege, who, the Qassam brigades are willing to fight. And that is, that emboldens people, and it gets a lot of support because there's nothing happening in Palestine until now. And like I said with the Nat Turner slave revolt, it changed the whole trajectory of slavery. And hopefully that's what October 7th does as well.
You know, I don't know why every Arab or every Muslim has to be labeled as a terrorist.
Right.
You know, there are some freedom fighters.
Right.
You know, in Ukraine, when the civilians are fighting for their freedom in Ukraine, they're freedom fighters. But why are Hamas and any Arab or Muslim or Palestinian who wants to fight for his freedom a terrorist? That's another propaganda we hear all the time.
Well, September 11th did not do a great deal in that.
That is true.
I just
Can I-
feel the Black Panthers. I feel like that's, whenever I think of Hamas, I always think of the Black Panthers because they did so much for the community,
Right.
but they were always seen as this violent movement because they were.
Well, the Black Panthers were very cool with the Al-Fatah party,
Can I just say something?
pre-Hamas.
Yeah.
You know?
Tricia,
Yeah.
may I say something?
Yes, but
I think something to note here is that Hamas itself was formed as a result of, and by the way, it's majority made up by under 25-year-olds and under who've witnessed both of their parents murdered in front of them, have had their homes bombed, and like it was referred to and alluded to earlier in this panel, many of these young men have actually been, since 2005, have witnessed 3 total bombardments. So a fixation on Hamas or even a zoom in on the fact that they are a quote-unquote Islamic group, I think is irrelevant to the fact that this group formed as a result of seeing every single loved one murdered, taken away from them, and the labeling of October 7 itself is similar to the labeling of 9/11, where now when people think of 9/11, they equate it with quote-unquote Islamic terrorism. They do not equate it with the lack of, they do not equate it with the failure of the Bush administration in its foreign policies, and it's always blamed on a minority group that's been previously oppressed and put in difficult positions. Similarly, in Gaza, October 7 was created in order to distract from with the reality of the situation, which we have over 30,000 people dead. We had a pregnant woman at the hospital intentionally raped in front of her husband.
That's not true. That's been debunked. I mean,
I'm sorry?
that's been debunked by Al Jazeera.
At Al-Shifa Hospital, Sarah, I don't think that's been debunked.
No, but what you just said about the pregnant woman who was raped and killed, that actually, I'm just to be facts, just because I'm about facts.
I'll
yeah.
touch on that later, but I think it's very important to just recognize that. And this isn't to, I'm really glad we're having this discussion, but I just think that, like Dr. Rashid said earlier, focusing on how American media has distorted these aspects is extremely important. And just remember that these are young men who have not had the ability to live a life outside of this open air prison. And just to respond to the Al-Shifa Hospital, there are resources that have.
I'm just saying that specific incident you spoke of, that incident, that woman who made that claim on air, she since retracted it and said that she made it up to. I'm just talking about that specific incident you're speaking
Are
of.
you referring to the same incident where the woman was
Raped in front of her family and then killed. That's the incident I'm referring to. Yeah.
okay. So go ahead.
Now I was going to say, before Hamas was created in 1987, but there was
I swear. I mean, I'll send you some links, but
there was a misquote.
that
There
doesn't
was-
change. That doesn't change the drasticness of what's happening. I just think that if we're going to scrutinize what the systemic claims of rape and abuse, we have to also just scrutinize. We just scrutinize everything. Everything has to be
The truth.
the truth. We have to have the truth, and that's the most
I'm
important.
going to say it's 2 different incidents because you said she came back and said, well, I lied, but she was dead. Oh.
Not
Oh,
her, some other woman
That's
who
what I'm
claimed
saying.
she saw
Oh,
the, some other
okay.
woman claimed she saw that. Then, like I said, the
Yeah,
pregnant
because
woman
he
whose
never
fetus
touched
was
it.
ripped open supposedly, listen, I know an Israeli, and he kept telling me, a woman's fetus was ripped out of her belly. I know, my friend scraped up her remains off the floor. I kept telling him, this didn't happen. Israeli Social Security Office said this didn't happen. Kibbutz Be'eri head said this didn't happen. Then they have to say it didn't happen. Because I said to him, what was her name? What was this pregnant woman whose fetus was ripped out of her stomach on October 7th? What was her name? Doesn't she have a name? And he said, oh, they didn't publish it. And I said, do you not think there'd be a Times of Israel story with all of her family members about this? Da-da-da-da-da. And then I had to show him an Israeli Channel 13 piece where they talked about how all that shit was made up. And he said nothing. You know, because there's nothing to say. I'm just saying, the truth is so important. I'm on that with every aspect.
I will say I understand where you're coming from. There is a contestation of that incident. I'm reading it right now. But I just think it's interesting that the Middle Eastern news sources are saying that it happened, but the Times of Israel, the Haaretz, are saying that the woman retracted that statement. And I just think that
In alignment with Al Jazeera and a Hamas investigation. A Hamas investigation, they are the ones who...
But I'm just saying there's a contestation.
Yeah, sure. There's a contestation about the
the
pregnant
truth
fetus.
is the first thing that goes.
Yeah,
That's
can
the
I just
problem.
answer what his question? Hamas was created 1987. Before that, there were so many things. In Lebanon, they killed thousands of Palestinians, Israel. Since 48 till 87, it wasn't Hamas, and Israel commit genocide, killing Palestinians. So you cannot blame Hamas when it's only there for like 30 years. It's been happening for 76 years.
Right.
The hard right in Israel prefer a non-secular Palestinian leadership. They prefer Hamas.
Absolutely.
They prefer non-Marxist organization as the PFLP was and was for so many years, the main fighting resistance force in Palestine. They don't want that.
And let's please understand the material roots of where Hamas comes from, which is, well, many, many things, but we can even just take it back to 1993 and the failure of the Oslo Accords and how a section of the Palestinian leadership was bought off to form the Palestinian Authority and basically become complicit in the governance of the occupation. And so with that kind of discrediting of so many different forces, along with the support of Islamic-based resistance movements in opposition to internationalist communist movements that would historically have been in leadership there, you have, well, a vacuum, and the only people who are doing any kind of resistance are going to be Hamas. They will become popular on that basis. They won democratic elections in 2006 that were immediately rejected by both the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and the international community, of course, led by the United States. And so we can just say, even Hamas has tried democracy, right?
Okay, let's take a question. Yeah?
Yeah, I wanted to challenge and hear your all's thoughts on the concept of the average American being so clueless about this. I actually had a great conversation with a fellow physician a few months ago about this, and he had told me that he's actually pretty aware of what's going on and he understands it in and out, but he basically refused or didn't want to take a stand because if he did, then it would challenge the safety of the security of the capitalism that he benefits from in America. So I was wondering what your all's thoughts were on that and how the Zionist project is almost like a safeguard for American capitalism. And I don't think all Americans are as clueless as we may think.
But the thing is, when American person make a comment or answer or stand up for anything, it's not going to be targeted like any other Palestinian. Like I'm standing here, it's recorded. I mean, I went to the council meeting, and there was a guy there. He was pointing at me and pointing finger, wait for me outside because I'm Palestinian. But you could say your opinion, you could do whatever. I don't think they can target you. So I'm just saying.
And something I want to add, I think this false narrative that the Zionist movement has put out, that for example, this quote-unquote democracy that Israel is supposedly carrying out, that's just a lot easier for the average American to believe and stand behind because we're all about democracy here, supposedly. And so there are these, there's this false narrative that, like you said, has been put out that kind of like is a security blanket for the average American. And so they, even though they probably know that the supposed democracy is not really what they claim it is. If you're oppressing a whole group of people to a small area of land, if you're oppressing a whole other group where you're occupying their lands, that's not democracy. If your elections are rigged every cycle and you can't even hold a proper election, what type of democracy is that? But for us average Americans, we are like able to stand behind that because it's almost like a security blanket to our average ideals and beliefs here. And so I do believe that a lot of them do know, or at least know a little bit about the truth, but it's a lot easier for them to just stick with the false information, the false narrative that's put out there because it doesn't challenge them. And being challenged here is
But you know,
something
also,
you don't want to do to
yes,
most
you know,
people.
when I'm in the hospital and a secretary comes and says, Dr. Rashid, are you Muslim in Lexington? And I say, yes. And she says, are you going to kill me? So look at the vast. Yes, Asya, you had a question.
I was just curious, with the elections coming up, they'll be here before you know it. For me, it's always been an easy, yes, pull a Democratic ticket. But now with all these things that we're seeing, it seems like we don't have a good choice.
Neither
I'm talking about for president.
Neither one. Yeah.
So what do you recommend we do? I mean, hopefully not vote is not the option, but
So what do we do?
how do we make that decision?
So not,
What advice can you give
yeah,
us?
voting is definitely, we have to show the numbers that we are.
Right.
To say one way or the other, I won't speak on that. I can't, but like you said, definitely staying silent is not an option because there are power in our numbers. We can't put someone in office, but we can keep somebody out of office and we have to show that. And we have to make that clear with this upcoming election. I don't know if anyone wants to give specific advice. I don't have.
Well, in these primaries, there's an uncommitted movement to, you know, because in Kentucky you can write uncommitted.
Okay.
And so, at least in the primaries, to show the Democrats that you don't support this by voting uncommitted. That's what the Ceasefire Coalition of Louisville is doing, and that's what they did in Michigan and stuff like that. But again, that's for the primary. I don't know how I think a lot of those people will sit out in the election. I mean, I'm not going to vote for
I mean, does that count if
anybody.
you write uncommitted? Or
It
do you
does.
just
I don't.
put
I
this
mean,
on-
I guess. I think it's only in the primaries where it's on the ballot.
There is a process, and
Yeah.
it's explained to you if that's what you want to do. I don't know how it's done.
Did you have a question?
Well, I was also going to mention about Netanyahu and his wanting to continue to grasp power and the problem that has here.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is embroiled in several corruption scandals. Israel as a state does not have a constitution. It's a common law country, and so there's not necessarily set out the exact separation of powers between, say, the judiciary and the executive and so forth. So Netanyahu is he's an asshole, according to anyone who's had to deal with him directly, diplomatically or otherwise. And there have been massive fractures in Israeli civil society over the preceding years with regard to the corruption scandals that he's been involved in particular some of the things that he's done to undercut the judiciary and become a dictator, let's say. So all of this is really serving, much as 9/11 served to rally people behind the lame duck President George W. Bush. The attacks of October 7th have given him a pretext to say, no, rally behind me. But actually, these fractures have just been papered over, and there are still increasingly now more voices, even from within Israel, who are finding problems with all this. Unfortunately, many of the voices that have problems with Netanyahu are even more fanatically right-wing and fascist than he is with regard to how they want to prosecute this genocide.
I didn't say there was a good answer, good option.
How do you feel about the response to the killing of the World Central Kitchen? How that response just prompted so much immediate action? How do you feel about that?
So we saw with the, and I'll call it an execution because that's what it was, right? That it was 3 cars, I don't know if you guys, how much you guys read into it, 3 cars separated kilometers apart. They hit the first car, then everybody that survived ran over to the second car, then they hit the second car, and then everybody that survived went over to the third car, and they hit the third car, killing all but 1 person. And we see that most of the people that died were British, white, Australians, or Americans. So there was a huge response from the world for the first time, even though Israel has been killing aid workers for the past 6 months. There have been 120 aid workers that were killed in similar manner. The Palestinians have been talking about it, that they're executing us. The doctors have been talking about it. I've seen doctors in Gaza saying we have to take off our scrubs and wear civilian clothing when we leave the hospital because they're aiming for us, right? So they have been telling us this, but the first time we see a response, and again, those people were there not to take anything away from them because they were there risking their lives, right? At the end of the day, this is not, you know, their home. This is not, you know, maybe not their religion, not their, but they're there sacrificing their lives and they got killed, right? But this has been going on. It is Israeli policy. They are forming these kill zones, killing doctors, killing. It's a way of scaring the population, right? You're scaring them into stopping the resistance. They've been doing it for years. Gaza has been a thorn at Israel's side since the beginning, right? When we see the most staunch resistance, it's usually coming from Gaza. The first Intifada started in Gaza, right, in Jabalia. So that is one way. They actually have a term for it. They call it the dahia, where they just want to carpet bomb, wipe everything. They did it in Lebanon in the 80s. They're doing it now in Gaza. At one point it was called scorched earth, right? We saw it here in the Civil War, burn everything, right? So this is just a continuation of that. Obviously, we know that we've known this, there's aspects of race connected, right? You can't have a genocide without dehumanizing the people. So people are feeling less towards, you know, Muslims and towards Gazans, Christians and Muslims. So that's probably why we see that huge response from the West.
And there's also some, Chef Jose Andres who leads, he's a State Department darling. He's he's the Biden guy. He's Spanish, so I don't even know if he could vote in America. But he also wrote a statement, you know, criticizing some Spanish premier who didn't call Hamas terrorists and said, oh, she's got to be fired. You know, do you call Russia? Like, you know, he was equating like Russia with Hamas. And then, so also Israel, they acknowledged it also, which there's evidence that basically says, like, kind of points to that they prefer the World Central Kitchen to UNRWA, right? They don't want UNRWA funded. They rather the World Central Kitchen, who's in the State Department pocket, basically, to run aid operations in Gaza. They definitely prefer them over UNRWA. So I think, you know, they've acknowledged and sort of apologized for this in a way. I think it's just so that they can kind of control who's administering aid, period.
And the World Central Kitchen is also the media darling.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's a media darling. But even Andres, he says, I believe that this is no longer a war against terrorism, it's a war against humanity. And so now the right-wing pundits in America, now they hate this guy too. So it's
He's actually Spanish American.
he's Spanish American.
Yeah,
Okay.
he is Spanish American, yeah. Any other yes?
How do the people in Palestine view America and the world as a whole? We're essentially watching them get murdered and killed every single day. So how do they view us as people unable to do anything or not much? Do they feel alone? Do they feel abandoned? How are they feeling?
There have been multiple videos that we've seen of people in Gaza directly who are feeling resentment towards the rest of the world, rightfully so. Like you said, Israel wouldn't have the power that they have if it weren't for the backing of the rest of the world. And so
America and Arab regimes, I
Yeah,
It's
Arab
not
regimes
just
as
the
well,
US.
that are in silence is a problem as well. And so, like you said, I obviously can't speak to exactly what they're feeling, but we've seen the videos where they are feeling resentment. They feel like they're being treated less than human, and the Israeli regime is getting away with it. They're being portrayed as less than human, and the media is getting away with it. And so, again, that just goes to speak to why it's so important that we use our voices as individuals. We all make up a part of society, no matter how small it is. And so it just goes to speak how important it is that you join the phone banking efforts and make that one phone call a day, because there are power in numbers, and we can truly start making a difference. And you might think that we're powerless and might feel like we're powerless, and we might be powerless, honestly, but it's important that we do our part and speak up when we can.
That's
So,
right.
yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, calling, writing letters. That's what we have to do, because they serve us.
Mhm.
They're elected officials, they serve us.
Yes.
We don't serve them. So we have to let them know how we feel. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Just want to say one thing. I feel like, and I've experienced this in my family, where a lot of people say things like, oh, well, we can't do anything, we can't change anything. And they use that as an excuse to keep going to places who are funding the Israeli murders. They use that as an excuse to turn a blind eye and look away. And I find myself incredibly angry with, my family, my parents, and I'm just wondering, what do we do even about that? How do we, challenging our family members to, educating them in these matters and so forth.
Well, you can tell them there's an app. There's an app when you go shopping. It's I think there are 2 apps actually, where you can scan in Costco or Kroger's, whatever, and they will tell you what companies support the genocide and support Israel and don't.
Yeah, it's called Boycat. So BOYCAT, and you could just scan the barcode of anything, and it'll tell you if it's compliant or not. And the biggest thing I say to that is, if we boycott everything, these companies aren't going to go out of business. Let's be realistic. But it is important to know that, your money. Do you want to be supporting a company that is supporting genocide? It's about also your own knowing what's right within yourself, and knowing even if it's just a couple of dollars, that's going to eventually support a genocide. So even if you're not stopping something, at least know that you're not directly contributing to it. And that's the first thing I always tell family members is, if we boycott Nestle, if we boycott Coke, we boycott Pepsi, all of these things, they're probably not going to go out of business. They're so widespread. But at least I know personally I'm not giving money directly to the genocide that's taking place in Palestine. And unfortunately, a lot of the discrimination that's going on around the world.
There was another app that says, just no thank you, or no thanks. It's the same thing, you scan it and it will show. Just something I heard today or yesterday, McDonald's buying every franchise in Israel because they were losing a lot of money. So they said no individual could have McDonald's. Now the company is buying it back because everybody is boycotting and they're losing a lot of money. So.
Yeah, so we need to do our research and know which companies support Israel, which are supporting. I just found out Five Guys hamburger. I'm not going there anymore, okay? I used to go.
Everything.
Okay? Everything, yeah. But like the Ben and Jerry ice cream. Ben and Jerry ice cream do not, they support Palestine. So when I'm in Florida, I go to Ben and Jerry ice cream. I don't go to other places. So, our money talks, okay? We're gonna go shopping, we're gonna go do this. Our money talks, our voice talks, okay? Our votes talk. So we have to be empowered, okay? And we have to support our friends and relatives and tell them, no, we can change the world, and we have to believe in ourselves. Yes?
I feel what you're saying. I have a companies, and they struggle with, they see me struggling coming to work and seeing what everything's going on, but they're not reposting, they're not doing all that stuff. I have family members who just like, you know what, I'm gonna stay out of it, I don't wanna be affected or anything. I think for me, the most important thing is to know that I'm doing everything that I can. Don't give in, to other people just kind of not caring. At the end of the day, it's always been about humanity, And as a Muslim sister, I would say just support one another, stay in groups like this, go to events that you can learn more about it, and then the parents and everybody else, they might fall in and start, wanting to support, and they may not, but that doesn't affect you. Like,
But
you
a
should
lot of
continue
people on
steadfast.
Facebook have come up to me and told me privately, Nadia, we agree with what you're saying on Facebook, but we really can't say like, and we can't make a comment because they might lose their job. I mean, how many people have lost their jobs, okay, because they did the
We
right
will
thing.
never forget.
So, yeah, so that's why, I post it and they come up to me and they tell me, keep doing what you're doing, okay, and we agree with you. We just,
And
Yeah.
having the conversations and posting, I always say, you never know. You might change one person's opinion, and you never know, that person might tomorrow be a politician in office. Even that's optimistic thinking, but for me, that's how I go about my everyday life. People make fun of me that I make Palestine my personality, but I find it very important that you have the conversations everywhere you go. You post on every social media you have. You use whatever voice outlet you have, so that you're changing. Even if it's just one or two people, you never know what that might do in the long run.
yes.
You mentioned earlier about it may not make a difference to these companies, they're not gonna go out of business and things like that. But if the bottom line starts to drop a little bit and some of the dividends to the shareholders aren't as good, and the shareholders say,
Yeah.
and so.
Yeah, even if
maybe-
it's just enough to scare them.
Money talks.
I'd like to say something about this and also address the earlier comments about, what we do about people who can't lose their jobs or don't want to speak out because of that. We're living through a very unique period in human history that is not going to continue, right? The last 40 years of neoliberal policies are crumbling apart in terms of this civilization's capacity to keep the wool over people's eyes, right? And in terms of the whole global order. And so that is the context that we are in. And even if you are the only person in your community that sees this, we have to anticipate that more and more people are going to materially reckon with this because that is, as Marx says, social being determines consciousness. So when you're in the middle of it, you can't necessarily even conceive of alternatives to it. But as the American empire crumbles globally, people are, again, going to be very confused and disoriented, and they're going to be astonished and not understand what's happening. So we have to have been as public as possible for as long as possible to explain what is happening, to explain it as it's happening, so that people can find each other, generalize their experience, and again, form a mass movement to address these issues.
Questions, comments? This is good.
Just talking about the voting uncommitted campaign. So the reason that we tell people to vote uncommitted as opposed to not voting at all, especially in the primaries, is because one, a lot of people don't vote in the primaries, so your voice is louder in the primaries. Two, if say 100 people are Democrats, right, and they go and vote, and 30 of them do not support Biden, and they go and vote. 70% support Biden, 30% do not support Biden, right? And that shows him that those 30% do not support him. But say that 30% just doesn't vote, it looks like 100% of people support Biden. So we have to show him that we do not support him and that we see what he's doing. And even if we don't vote for the other party, at least we can say, hey, we are not going to vote for you, And so when it comes time for the primaries, and I will say, registration, the deadline for registration is April 22nd. Please make sure you all are voted, and your families, and your children, and your neighbors, and your friends. Make sure they're all registered to vote, because if you're not registered by April 22nd, come May, you won't be able to vote, and it'll be too late. So don't say like you weren't told to vote or to register, because that needs to happen ASAP. And that's just one way we're using. That's just one way we're using our voice to stand up for what's right, stand up for injustice, stand out against oppression in our capacity. Hannah has said multiple times about the Call Your Representatives initiative. I have this banner over here that you can scan, and as you guys walk out, you guys can do it if you want. But that's where you call your elected representatives. So if nobody says anything, how are they going to know that we do not support what they're doing, right? So this initiative is Monday our two senators, Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, and then our elected district official, our House of Representatives. In Lexington, that's Andy Barr, and I know, we all know, like, Mitch McConnell and Andy Barr and the way that their stance is, and it's like very, very hard to sway them, but we have to still speak out, because even if they don't change, at least they can't change us. You know, we did our part, and these calls take 3 to 5 minutes. They take, sorry, I'm getting over a sinus infection. They take 3 to 5 minutes, and a script is given to you. If you hate talking to a person, you guys can call after hours. It counts just the same. And what they're looking for is numbers. So if you feel like I've been calling every day and nothing's happening, keep calling. Because you call and then somebody else starts calling and then somebody else starts calling. Those numbers add up. And every single day when that number adds up, it goes to the top of their priority list and they have to address it. So that's why we say you cannot falter. You have to keep going. Every single day you have to call them. Because how else are they going to know?
Good point, yes.
And this is extremely, extremely hopeful, but if you have a huge number of uncommitted, maybe somebody in the media will report that. Maybe the polls will, share that with the public, and that would be a good stance too.
We saw that happen in Chicago, actually. They had a significant amount. I think, I don't want to say a false number, but they had a significant amount that was great enough that the media reported it.
Right.
And that's saying, we don't have the numbers to put people in office, but we have the numbers to keep them out. And so that's the most important thing to let them know.
Correct. Yes, Wafa.
One of the things that sometimes can't sleep over is something that you mentioned before about culture disappearance. So I've been trying to kind of cook Palestinian food, which I've never done before, by the way. And like I embroider and I look for groups for that. And I wonder if there's anything in Lexington that can be, that already exists or be made just to like tell stories of culture, at least so that people can, again, like with the dehumanization, I feel like it's the only thing that really kind of makes sense, like, like what you're wearing and all of the, like teaching Palestinian embroidery. I know that they've tried to get DMC, the embroidery company, to do what they did for Ukraine, which is basically put embroidery patterns, free patterns, and they finally did it, but they weren't Palestinian, which broke my heart. So I don't know if that's something we can do, and I would love to take part in something like that, even just like a potluck and just like people trying cooking classes, whatever.
Yeah, we'll get you connected.
That would be
Yeah,
awesome.
we'll get you connected, and that's a really good point, yeah. And we have to support Palestinian-owned businesses. There is a list somewhere, if we can get it to people, there's a list of Palestinian-owned businesses that are local. We need to support them because they're suffering, and they've got family abroad. So these are things we can do.
Also, we have someone in Leicester, Palestine working on like a block party type event where they're gonna
It's silent auction.
So it's gonna be, and the purpose of it is to highlight the culture, like you're saying, so it's not erased, and so that the people of Lexington know how strong the culture is. But Lex4Palestine will post more about that, but I don't know, because I don't know a lot of details about it because I'm not part of that planning committee, but yeah.
Yes.
Just to show my ignorance, I don't know what your all's garb is. You got one and you. I noticed, what does that mean? What is it for?
Go ahead. Who's sitting there?
Oh, this is a kufiya.
Okay.
So it's, Hannah could probably explain it better, but
Yeah. So it was initially worn by like the working class, mostly like out in the heat, and then eventually it became associated with like resistant efforts, especially during the times of the intifadas. There is like significance to the actual pattern on it. So the top part right there where Jen is pointing to is like a fishnet. Again, this is all to represent the working class. And so that's the like a fishnet. Obviously there are lots of ports and it's surrounded by sea. And then the black lines, or what Jen is pointing to now, is believed to be like olive tree branches, or olive leaves, sorry. And olive trees are extremely significant to the Palestinian people. And then the black solid lines are trading routes. And again, this is just representative of the working class initially, but it's become more associated with resistant efforts now. And it's just to show your solidarity with the Palestinians.
And then these are the Palestinian flag.
And it actually dates back to...
I got that. I got that.
It actually dates back to ancient Babylon. So you'll see them worn even in Iraq and Jordan. You'll see it in black and red. So, so yeah, it actually dates back to ancient Babylon, this pattern and these colors.
And
Very briefly, so that nobody is concerned about what is going on outside, I'm gonna finish a little bit before 4 so we can enjoy it. But there's gonna be a dance mob outside at 4 o'clock. So that's the camera, and you'll see some people over here who are dressed up super cute. So that'll be at 4 o'clock. So that's nothing having to do with us. I know some of us were worried. So.
It was illegal. The first Intifada, 87. If I was walking on the street and I'm wearing it, I will go to jail. They won't allow it. The Israeli.
You can't wear them in the
We cannot wear them on the street now. Now you can wear it. I mean, now there's resistance everywhere. But 87, we weren't allowed to wear them.
Well, today
Yeah,
also
so-
you can't wear them in the United Arab Emirates and in some places in Saudi Arabia. You can't wear them in
Well, in
all the
Dubai,
rest.
I bought that in Dubai, and I got every color. Pink and purple, and I've got all the colors.
In Abu Dhabi, you can't wear it.
Comments, questions,
Yeah, I just want to add something. I mean, if you go to Israel, and no matter who you are, American, European, with a passport, or even if you're the president's cousin, if you say anything against their policy, you're in jail. They will kick you on the street. They might kill you, and they kill American before, between press or people just resisting or helping Palestinian. So doesn't mean your American passport is going to help you there if you go against their policy. And they're doing it. There was a lot of videos. You could find it. I mean, media is not going to show you that. But till today, they want our money. They want our tax money. But they want to shut up. And they want to do whatever they want to do.
I would like to add that the Palestinians and the people in Gaza in general do separate the American government from the American people. I saw actually aid workers from Kuwait going into Gaza recently. Al Jazeera did the coverage, and they said every child they would walk by and they showed it, they would say hello, hello, hello. And I would tell them, he's like, I'm speaking to them in Arabic, saying, why won't you speak to me in Arabic? I'm Arab, like you. And he said they're used to American aid workers coming in helping. They're used to British aid workers coming in helping. There's a street in Gaza named Rachel Corrie Street, named after an activist that was there to stop the demolitions of Gazan homes, and Israelis ran over her, right? So they...
self-emulated
Arab Bushel.
So yeah, so they do separate, and so for the Kuwaiti man, it was a wake-up call for him that, oh, we've only come in this war, right? While aid workers from all over the world were coming in before, so they just saw an aid worker and assumed American, British, right? So they do separate between the American government, which obviously they're very critical of. They know who's sending the bombs, you know, and the American people.
I have two questions. So you all have used these two words a lot throughout this discussion. Can someone just differentiate between terrorism and resistance, please?
Isn't that up to the eye? I think it's in the eye of the beholder sort of thing. I mean, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I mean, common saying. I was talking to an Israeli person I know, and I asked him, what would perfect Palestinian resistance look like to you? An Israeli who claims they're for peace,
Dead.
And I said, what would perfect Palestinian resistance be to you? Like, and they don't have an answer. And I said, we talked about, I said, the tunnels, right? I said, what if, Qassam was building military infrastructure above ground? It would be destroyed, right? They're not allowed to have a standing army. They're not allowed to resist. They're obviously going to have this underground tunnel network, not only for military actions, but also to bypass the blockade and siege, and they have every right to do so because it's illegal. And so it becomes a decision you make. Who is the oppressed and who is the oppressor? And for me as a Jewish person whose family was removed from their home, refugees, put in an internment camp, on the run for 3 years during the Holocaust, in the camp my family escaped from, everyone was sent to Auschwitz like 4 months later. So, for me, I know what resistance is when I see it. So it's a decision you make, I think.
Jonathan's absolutely right, and we cannot allow our discourse to be circumscribed by what the media or the mainstream political establishment or anyone else decides are the terms that we have available to us, right? This is long ago established an anti-colonialist struggle that you cannot equate the violence of the oppressed with the violence of the oppressor. It's simply not, every armed conflict, any conflict in history has had atrocities, has had sensationalist allegations and propaganda from both sides. But we can look at this and see one side has nuclear weapons and attack fighters and missiles and the most advanced surveillance infrastructure in the world, and the other side is picking up rocks to throw.
Exactly.
So that's it. That's as much analysis as we need to do.
Yes.
Can I ask my second question? Can someone please explain what from the river to the sea means? Your favorite question.
My favorite question. The river is the Jordanian River where Jesus was baptized. That's divided between Jordan and Palestine. And the sea is the Mediterranean Sea. That's Palestine. So when we say from the river to the sea, we're talking about Palestine. To be free from these 2 points. A lot of people question like, what sea, what river? I mean, they're making fun of the river. I mean, the river is drying, but the river goes in history. Even Jesus was baptized in that river. So, is it good enough?
Does from the river to the sea mean the extermination of Jewish people?
No, we have to understand where this phrase came from. It was not Palestinians who made it up. It's from the 1977 Likud Party constitution, one of the most right-wing parties in Israel. And so it is a Zionist policy that was always about extermination, and it has been reappropriated by the resistance movement, by the freedom movement, to say, no, Palestine will not be subdivided into 2 states or whatever. It is this whole territory.
But, I mean, when we were kids, that's before 1977, because we weren't allowed to say it straight, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We used to, as a kid, sing it from the Mayil al Mayil, from the water to the water, that's Palestine, because we couldn't say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We used to say from the Mayil to Mayil, and it's always before 1777. Are we?
Yeah, we're good on time.
Okay,
4 o'clock.
I'm gonna say Palestine, the occupied Palestine, they're poor. We don't have money. Most of the Arab countries. So whoever give you the money, he control. So whenever you say why everybody's against Hamas now, because it was funded from some countries going against the United States. It's like Ukraine and Russia. Anything Russia will do, even if they help any country, the United States is going to say, no, they're terrorists, they're killer, we shouldn't go against them. And that's what happened in Palestine. Certain groups, Hamas and other groups, getting funds from different countries. whichever
With-
United States approve that country, like they don't care if you give it to the PLO, United States gives some money to the PLO, they're okay. But because they're not giving it to Hamas because Iran or Russia is giving it, so they are terrorists.
Right, in this case, Qatar mainly, yeah.
So,
Questions? Yes.
Max, can we explain why the term ceasefire is not anti-Semitic and is not like divisive? Because I see especially in city council and like when talking to people about like why they don't use the language of ceasefire, they say it's divisive. So why has that become the case? Why has it become divisive?
So first of all, the most important thing to address is anytime any type of language gains momentum, it's weaponized as anti-Semitism, and it's used against us. And we saw that, like, a perfect example is from the river to the sea. It started gaining momentum, we started here everywhere, and then they portrayed it as something it wasn't, that it was calling for the extermination of Jewish people, which it obviously isn't. And so for a ceasefire, they're saying that if we are calling for a ceasefire, we want the resistance efforts to gain power and take over and continue what they did on October 7th. And that's like this claim. Obviously, it's not. It's before we started calling for it in Gaza, it was clear. It means ceasefire, stop the fire, stop what's taking place against the Palestinians and against the people of Gaza. And it's obviously not anti-Semitic. It's been deemed as such because it's gaining power, because there's so many people calling for it, and they wanted. It's almost like to deter you from the main goal and to cause a distraction by painting it as such, and then it creates so many conversations around that word that it distracts from the main goal. And that's what we've seen with city council, that's what we've seen with the government in general, is that we have to sit here and defend our use of the word, and so that just creates a distraction in itself, and they're succeeding in it. Unfortunately, they're succeeding in it, that we have to sit there and defend ourselves and have 10 more conversations on why that word is okay, and then that distracts from the main goal of calling for that ceasefire. And unfortunately, again, they're succeeding with it, and there's a lot of power in rhetoric that's used, especially in times where things are so taboo, and the people in power know how to play that game where they weaponize rhetoric so that they distract from the main goal.
Yes.
Are there any more questions from anybody? I would like to go down the line. If you all have anything that has you feel like we haven't touched on, or that you're passionate about, that you just feel needs to be out there. It's being broadcasted. You have a lot of ears here, and I hope everyone will tune in, and whatever they share with us, we can take outside with us and share with other people. But is there anything else that you just feel compelled to share with us? And if Jonathan's ready, we'll start with you.
Not really, no.
Hannah, you want to start on your side? If you don't have anything, it's okay.
I think
Just
the
start.
biggest thing, and we've emphasized this over and over, and I'll continue to say it, is it didn't start on October 7th, obviously. I moved to Palestine in 2006, and I lived there for 4 years, and I got to visit all parts of Palestine, but it wasn't even a question to go visit Gaza because they were closed off to the rest of the world. Even an open-air prison isn't a right term to use because that implies that they did something, and they didn't. They were put in this concentration camp where they've been oppressed technically since 2006 is whenever it was closed off, but before that. And so it's important that whenever you're having these conversations, and when people want to attack with October 7th or attack with whatever that they come with, that's the most important thing to say is it didn't start then. And like I said, I've been to all parts of Palestine. My mom is here. We go every summer. We visit all the different parts of it. Luckily, fortunately, I'm a citizen of 1948, so I can go all around the land. A privilege that's not granted to most Palestinians. And so, like I said, I get to go to all parts, but even as an American, even as a Arab of 1948, Gaza was out of question because they have been closed off to the rest of the world, and they have been facing an oppression that none of us can even begin to fathom.
I'd just like to add that, inshallah, I have hope for the future, that I feel like we're having these conversations internationally that we've never had before about Palestine. That for the first time, even on the international court, we're discussing Israel, or even arming Israel, that Britain is now having this conversation. Even the U.S. is kind of talking about, arming of Israel, and for the first time ever. So I'm having hope that this will hopefully be the end of the settler colonialism project.
I think something important that was touched on a bit earlier, but when discussing the word ally, it's different a little bit for me. I am of Palestinian blood and very proudly so, but I'm also white. My mother's American, and so I come across to most, if you don't know my name or my family's heritage, as a white American as I am. And so the demographic and the group of people that I interact with the most, mainly young men my age, again, mainly white Americans, I'm in a crowd of people that I don't even want to say that they don't know, and I don't mean this insultingly at all, but they're just not that interested, just as they're not interested in many political things, in many social things. And so I'm in a unique situation in that when I share, Hannah mentioned it's a bit of a responsibility, or you feel that you're informing maybe just one person. And I want to encourage people in this room who maybe feel even further isolated from this, as I'm just an American or whatever your heritage may be, and that you don't have this connection, is I've had the most unexpected of friends or acquaintances reach out to me and just ask, what's your perspective on this? What's your, I know nothing about this. I don't even know the difference between Israel and Palestine. Can you explain it to me? And I'm maybe not the best source, but that's an ally. Like, an ally isn't sitting at this table and speaking. An ally isn't, it certainly is those things. It isn't just speaking at a podium or even sharing on, your Instagram story or social media. Those things are tremendous and they have such a greater impact than you realize. But just expressing your support of a friend, of a coworker, of a fellow employee, whatever it may be, is those things are relevant. Being an ally can be such a small act, and just as if I can share and hopefully inform one person, if you can act as an ally and just support just one person in your life, it's more than zero, and that's so certain. And sharing something, it's more than just not sharing something. I know that sounds so literal, but it's the truth. And choose what you share. Just because you share one thing, you don't have to endorse everything that is put out there. Share only something about protecting children in Gaza. I don't think that's a controversial topic for anyone. Is understand that being an ally can be a small act, but it can have such a huge impact. And it's easier said than done, but I would encourage you to do that and not be afraid, because it can be such a tremendous thing in such a small action of your own.
Yeah, for me, I think I've said this before, but I just want to express so much gratitude for my comrades here, for everyone in Lexington for Palestine. The entire time that I've lived in Kentucky, this has been the most vibrant, coherent, well-educated political movement that I've ever seen. And so I just hope everyone can take a moment to recognize how precious this is that we're gathered here. We can look at each other in the eye and find that solidarity. And I want to find ways to nurture this beyond just this moment, beyond just stopping the genocide, and what else we can do, because I think truly the single greatest thing that we can do to help Palestine, to help Yemen, Congo, Sudan, anywhere, is to overthrow the ruling class here in this country. And we have to do that together.
Well, I just want to say, my thing is, don't trust everything you hear. Like, you heard my story, and you heard the other side, and you gotta do most of the job to study, look around, Google stuff, then judge with your own, because every story got two sides to it. Then you could say, don't wait for the news to tell you what the Palestinian did, what the Israeli did, what the Jewish did, what the Muslim, what the Christian. You got to work on it. Then you could judge and teach the generation. Growing up in a different country, we know about United States more than most people live here knows about United States. We learn history. We learn everything. Here, my kids, they don't know nothing. They went to school, they don't know nothing. So this is how you judge, and this is how you find out which one is right and which one is wrong, and who you need to support.
Now I can think of something. Palestine being free is a catalyst for so much more. This is why they don't want it to be free, because with it comes the acknowledgement of American Indian suffering, the suffering of slavery. It's all culminating in this moment, and Palestine has been that for a long time. As I said, the Black Panthers were very involved. The Black Power movement was very involved with Palestine. It saw it as a representation of their struggle in America. And so that's why Palestine must be free, to free everything else.
All right, we want to thank Lex4Palestine. And Lex4Palestine, you can see what else is coming up on Instagram, okay, for putting this together. Before we go, we'd like to thank everybody for coming. Please spread the word, and we want to have more of these kind of meetings. And thank everybody on the panel.